Hello everyone, welcome to the video. So this video is about a concept that I call the Schizoid Serf, and it's how the American dream over time became British. And the first time that I saw this concept was when I read this book called Introduction to Permaculture, and it's by Bill Mollison, and I I would tell everybody to read it. It doesn't matter if you're into agriculture or gardening. It doesn't really matter. The philosophy of permaculture is just it's just so applicable to just daily life and just doing things practically, doing things functionally. And this concept of what is called the schizoid serf, which is the essentially the epitome of not only just the American dream, but like the modern American man. And the modern American man has essentially turned into this kind of schizophrenic peasant, essentially toiling away endlessly for essentially for creature comforts. And this concept comes from this quote. It's probably my favorite quote. There's a bunch of amazing quotes in that book, but this is one of my favorites. So here, let me share my screen. So it says the condition of a lawn is peculiar to the British landscaping ethic. What we are really looking at here is a miniature British country estate designed for people who have servants. The tradition has moved right into the cities and right down to the quarter-acre patches. It has become a cultural status symbol to present a non-productive facade. The lawn and its shrubbery is a forcing of nature and landscape into a salute to wealth and power, and has no other purpose or function. The only thing that such designs demonstrate is that power can force men and women to waste their energies in controlled, menial, and meaningless toil. The lawn gardener is a schizoid serf as well as the feudal lord, following his lawnmower and wielding his hedge clippers, and contorting roses and privet into fanciful and meaningless topiary. And and I love this quote because it really gets down to this like suburbia American dream type of situation where you pretend like you're a feudal lord, like you're a landlord, but you don't have any servants. So you either have to pay people or you have to contort the landscape into this non-productive aesthetic facade, which essentially comes from Britain. It comes from these country estates, these noblemen, these people who've inherited a lot of money. Let's say their grandfather had a railroad, right? And so they have, essentially endless money. And so they can pay people, or originally we had slaves do this stuff. They had slaves do it. And so what we're what we're doing is we're we're basically trying to be servant and lord all in one. Because the only reason why a lord has servants do all this stuff is because they would not want to do it. I mean, they would not want to make all these shapes, these useless shapes, and these the useless order of it all. That it just looks nice, it looks fancy, and that's really the only use of it is to look nice. There's no productive value here. You're contorting bushes into different nice looking shapes. For what purpose? For what reason? There's no function here in the British estate. There might be, they might have some function. But in this image behind this quote, what is any of this doing? It really is kind of like a schizophrenia. It's what is this? Why does this bush look like this? There's no reason other than like a deranged mind is like, ooh, let's cut this bush into a shape for no reason. It's one thing to trim things, but this is just ridiculous and does nothing. It has no value, and the only reason that they give it value is because of money. Because you can just throw money at this until it looks like something that's super interesting and fancy looking. But the reason why that they can have a non-productive facade is because they have tons of money. They don't have to be productive because they can just buy food, right? Or they can have a large part of their other estate be pasture for cattle and things. And they can just have the majority of their estate look like this for no reason. Because they probably have like a farm over here. So this tells the story of essentially how it made its way into America, into this American dream, where instead of creating a productive facade, instead of creating a productive landscape to match our status, which is that we don't have tons of money to spend. A lot of people don't have enough money to pay their bills. So why the heck are we cutting the dang grass? You know, we need to have animals eat that grass, right? So that we can have meat from those animals. That's how it works on a farm, or that's how it works in nature. So you start to see how this suburbia concept, it really comes from Britain. It comes from these big country estates that have no functional value. After reading this quote, I I started to write because this concept made me think so much because we're all a part of this meaningless kind of fanciful system. So I started to write about it, and this is an excerpt from it. It says, "How silly are we tending to our lawns as though we are lord and servant all in one, maintaining our own luxury. It is a peculiar kind of slavery to be a slave to your own meaningless devices. It is truly the worst type of shackles. It's as if we wear a slave collar while sitting on a throne. It is a truly unique type of insanity that the middle class has become, a molding together of the nobility and the lowly peasant, as if a people could toil away while living in luxury, never actually attaining the luxury they seek because they are too busy maintaining it. This may in fact encapsulate a truly deep and horrible kind of conspiracy to make us believe that the American dream, which isn't American at all, to work for your luxury like a slave works for his meals, toiling away for eternity so that you can have a glimpse into the life of the elite. What a special kind of slavery that is, to be your own slave, occupied with useless toil till the end of your days. Now we all get to live lives of luxury for the low, price of perpetual bondage. Everyone is dumbed down to a dull knife for this higher standard of living, quote unquote. Everyone reduced to a happy 5 out of 10 stars. This is the real slavery because it is unrecognizable to us when we are living in it. It is not quite slavery and not quite luxury, but somewhere in between. So it escapes our gaze because we are too occupied with its maintenance while also too subdued by its comforts. If something tortures you by day and lulls you to sleep at night, what do you call this thing but a parasite on your life, a scourge on your soul, the only oppression holding you down? A life of useless toil for creature comforts may be the darkest prison ever conceived. And really, this really encapsulates this kind of quote unquote American dream. It is an American fever dream, this suburbia of perfectly kept lawns, and little patches of non productive land. That type of thinking is going to essentially destroy us because we cannot maintain it. And we're too busy maintaining the quote unquote luxury that we have. Luxury is not luxury because you maintain it. Luxury is luxury, like the British nobleman, because you have other people to do that for you. It's no longer luxury anymore. All your creature comforts are no longer comforts because you have to take care of them. You have to actually maintain it. That's why super wealthy people have other people do everything else for them so that they can live in luxury. They don't mow their own lawn. They don't do all this useless stuff that they do. That a lot of it is just so that we can be unproductive, so that we can sit around and do nothing productive. It's the opposite of reality, which is that we would want our land, right? We would want our house, we would want our home and our land to be productive because it would give us more value. We would have to spend less money because then we would have resources. We would have food. We would potentially be a part of a community that also does the same. So it builds a community resilience. Instead of everyone being equally dependent on essentially broken systems and constantly wasting their time on useless toil that doesn't produce anything, we could all be spending our time being productive, not productive members of society, but productive lords of our land. Because the suburbia landlord is this schizoid serf that's going around with his hedge clippers, uselessly clipping away at shrubbery. And there's another quote from Introduction to Permaculture that I love. It says the wage slave, peasant, and landlord and industrialist alike are all deprived of the leisure and the life spirit that is possible in a cooperative society which applies its knowledge. Both warders and prisoners are equally captive in the society in which we live. And this is the perfect way to describe it because truly, like I was saying, if we all were productive and lived in productive communities, then we would not need to do all this useless crap that doesn't mean anything and doesn't produce anything. It doesn't connect us to anything besides more labor, besides using more fuel. Like in the calorie trap video that I have that talks about the whole broken agricultural cycle of production, consumption, and waste management. This is a part of it too, because not only do we need the fuel to fuel all the machines for agriculture, we also need the fuel to fuel the machines for our little suburban plots that don't produce anything, so we can just cut the grass all day and then put a bunch of fancy little plants in our yard that don't do anything and don't design it to where it's a productive ecosystem for us. And what we're doing is we're degrading the land that we're on and wasting our energy. So, in a cooperative society that applies its knowledge, we can have a type of leisure. We can have a type of this kind of life spirit that is possible because we apply our knowledge and we design to where we can have these productive ecosystems that feed us and that clothe us and that give us the resources that we need. And we can feed those resources back into the land when they become waste. This only can happen in a cooperative society, which applies its knowledge across disciplines and integrates this knowledge and then applies it to the design of the land. And that's why there's a quote from the Permaculture Designer Manual. It says, traditional agriculture is um, traditional agriculture is labor intensive. Modern agriculture is energy intensive, uses a lot of energy. as we showed in the calorie trap video. It uses more calories than it produces. And permaculture is design intensive. So that's the point that needs to be made. It's we're working on a design here. We're being super intentional with the land that we live on. Okay, we're not being unintentional. We're not being unconscious servants of a different type of design, right? We're not being these schizophrenic serfs going around and pretending like we're a lord while we're, clipping our hedges and being unproductive. Um, so yeah, this quote also reminded me of this part of a movie called My Dinner with Andre. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with this, but
Concentration camp, where the camp has been built by the inmates themselves, and the inmates are the guards, and they have this pride in this thing they built. They built their own prison, and so they exist in a state of schizophrenia, where they are both guards and prisoners, and as a result, they no longer have, having been lobotomized, the capacity to leave the prison they made, or to even see it as a prison. Concentration.
so this is the kind of perfect representation of what I'm talking about as well, is this quote unquote concentration camp that we're living in, right? And so since we've built it, right? Since we're maintaining it, since we're developing it, we are the inmate and the guard, just as we are the servant and the Lord. And so, like it says here, we have all this pride in it. People take great pride in mowing their lawn. They take great pride in wasting their energies for no productive value. So, in a sense, they've built their own prison because not only do they are they dependent on these creature comforts that they have, they now need to toil away endlessly to maintain them. So they're essentially maintaining their own captivity. It would be like an elephant going around and fixing the cage that it's in. It is a kind of schizophrenia. And this is part of this fever dream world that has been passed down to us that did not exist that long ago, but it does now. It says they're both guards and prisoners. And as a result, they no longer have the capacity to leave the prison they've made or even see it as a prison. They don't see it as a prison because it's just normal. It's like, oh yeah, I just do this stuff. I just go through the motions every day. That's fine. Um, yeah, but it's like we've all been lobotomized. That's kind of what it's like. And people are starting to wake up to this, that we can't live these unconscious, unintentional lives anymore. And we need to start to create things that are more intentional for us. And this is another quote that I love. Each member of suburbia becomes imprisoned by the very separation that he has prized. He is fed through a narrow opening, a telephone line, a radio band, a television circuit. This is from The City and History by Lewis Mumford. We essentially have become prisoners of our own making, and we have separated ourselves from each other in a sense and from a productive community. They used to be maybe a village where we share our resources and we're cooperative with each other and we design our land intentionally so that it produces things for us and it doesn't just produce aesthetics. Um, And in this process of kind of giving away the production to essentially corporations, that's what we've given our productive capacity over to. If you want to see what the productive capacity of agriculture is on a main scale for corporations, you need to go watch my calorie trap video. It's the last video I made. That goes into the agricultural cycle we have. And people think, oh, well, That's a good system. If I just do my job and I make money, then I can depend on that. Well, that system's falling apart very fast, and we're going to have to do something about it pretty quick. I mean, it's always been destined for destruction, but now it's really bad. So we have to start using our own land to do this kind of stuff. And this is another quote from My Dinner with Andre. It says, but the other people, they are living in an insane dream world. They're not looking. That seems very strange to me. We're just walking around in some kind of fog. I think we are all in a trance. We're walking around like zombies. I don't think we are even aware of ourselves or our reaction to things. We're just going around all day like unconscious machines. We can't be direct, so we end up saying the weirdest things. So, this has to do with kind of how people are to me. Once I started to figure out this information, it's almost like we're all walking around in a fog, right? We're all kind of unconsciously going about this process. We unconsciously just throw away trash. Everyone does it, including me. We unconsciously are just a part of these systems and going through the motions. But we need to realize that these systems don't serve us anymore. And we have to start our own systems. We have to start being more intentional. This goes, this as well has to do with my kind of fever dream world concept, where people are kind of in a fever dream almost, where they're doing these things that don't serve them at all, but they're dependent on the very things. It's like that quote from The Matrix where he says, they're so dependent on the system that they will fight to defend it. And this is exactly what happens. Is you're kind of walking around in this fog, but I mean you don't know anything else. And before I started looking into what I would call kind of the real world, I was just walking around in a fog. I was just kind of unconscious. And this begins to peel back the layers of what I would call the real world, or the beginnings of the real world, where we actually deal with reality. We don't deal with these fanciful, fantastical things that are only really in our imagination, or that are just vanity on display, like thinking that turning a bush into an elephant shape is going to somehow be valuable to anyone. So, after all that, that's all kind of doom and gloom. I want you to imagine a system where lawnmowers were replaced with grazing animals and ornamentals were replaced with productive perennials or annuals. A place where we didn't toil away uselessly, but worked efficiently and intentionally. What if we replaced our lawns with abundant food forests and beautiful orchards? Imagine instead of an unproductive facade, we had a productive paradise. And this needs to be the antithesis of this. This needs to be, this needs to be replaced with this, right? We need to replace this with this right here. Where grazing animals eat the grass that we have, right? Where we have orchards, where we have food forests, where we put the land to productive use. We put every acre, because if we put every acre that people own on earth to productive use, there would be no way that anyone could be starving. It would not be possible if every acre was used for productive use. And it would increase biodiversity. It would increase all kinds of things. If we put the land to productive use on every single acre, we would have too much food. We would have too many apples. We would have too many avocados. Sure, in some places you wouldn't be able to grow as much. Some places would have to prioritize certain plants over others, and that's fine. But this is the kind of thing that we need to move towards. People will always bring up problems, but in permaculture, you have to look for solutions. You have to be positive. You have to be proactive. Don't stay with the problems. Try to find solutions for them. They're like, oh, well, I won't be able to get avocados in Canada every year. Okay, well, you ain't eating them anymore. Too bad. So sad. Um, the main thing is, I'm going to read this. This is an excerpt I have. We need to move away from the modern prison paradigm of maintaining our own useless luxury and move toward a system of productivity and self-sufficiency. We should not be slaves of our own devices, but masters of our own lives and the land we live on. And this is really it. We need to move away from this where we are inmate and guard all in one. This kind of modern prison paradigm, this modern prison complex where we're quote unquote maintaining our own useless, unproductive luxury. And we need to move towards this system of productivity, of self-sufficiency, of resiliency, of food sovereignty, of skilled independence, right? So that we're not slaves of our own devices and our own lives and lifestyles, but that we are masters of life and also the land that we live on and also the ecosystems that we live in. And this is the main goal. This is where we need to go into the future in America. This should be the American dream. Productive, connected, resilient communities, not these communities of people toiling away so that they can have air conditioning. So this is direction that we need to go. Well, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and share the video, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.